Good old St. Patrick. Quite the story there. A person who's kidnapped and dragged to a foreign land and escapes, but then decides that that place, those people, need to hear about Jesus. So he goes back into that same place where he was held captive to reach people. That's why I'm wearing green today. I even have on Green Lantern socks, so just saying. I've got a whole, my kids get me so many socks. I have a sock drawer. I could go on and on. I have Sesame Street ones, just crazy. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's got to be strong, and he's got to be fast, and he's got to be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's got to be sure, and it's got to be soon, and he's got to be larger than life. If you're not up on your hits of the 1980s like I am, that is the chorus, part of the chorus anyway, from Bonnie Hunt's I Need a Hero, also found on the original soundtrack to Footloose, in case you want to go and listen to it. But she asks the thought-provoking question in the song, where have all the good men gone? She talks about the heroes, the white knights upon their steeds, coming to risk the odds, to risk life and limb, to save and to rescue those in peril. Where have they all gone? It's an interesting song that questions the willingness of people today to step up and to do that level of giving of themselves in order to help those who need it. It's a trait that is sadly lacking today, and yet that song is 40 years old this year. Makes you feel kind of old, doesn't it? Watching my shows as a kid, it's so interesting. It never crossed my mind that when someone needed rescuing, that the hero in the show just wouldn't show up. You know what I mean? The A-team were asked to right a wrong, to help the helpless, and they're like, nah, not feeling it today, sorry. The bat signal shines in the night sky, but Bruce Wayne just kind of like goes and pulls the covers over his head and goes back to sleep. Lois Lane falls off the roof of the Daily Planet building for like the 100th time. But as Clark sees her like whiz by the window, he just shakes his head and goes back to typing the story. You know, like that just would not happen. The hero in these stories, they always saved the day. They gave everything they had, all their energy, their strength, their wits. They just wouldn't quit until their last breath. And I think that is what attracts us to heroes, doesn't it? It's not their powers, their abilities, as cool as they are. It's not their gadgets, their grappling hooks, and their fancy arrows. Sure, they get to wield swords and blast bad guys with their power rings and run super fast over water to catch the ones trying to get away. But it's not all that stuff that draws us to heroes. Now, what makes them a hero, what makes them special, and what makes us want to be like them, to imitate them, is their willingness to go and to do what needs to be done. To step up and to help the helpless and to save those who need to be rescued. In Judges chapter 6 and 7, we meet a hero. Well, actually, we don't. We meet a scared and doubtful man with a ton of questions. But Gideon, he goes through a process by which he learns what is needed to become one. We pick up today in Judges chapter 6, the first few verses. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, and so the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains and caves and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east, they would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy invading hordes coming with their livestock and tents were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves of camels too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. And so Israel was reduced to starvation by the Israelites. Then, after 7 years of this, the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. So the same pattern is going on. The Israelites have once again fallen away from the one true God. And in this cycle of stupidity, they've forgotten about all the good, all the blessings, all the love and the care that God has given to them over the years. And they've looked at the garbage around them, these other nations who appear to be having lots and lots of fun. And they choose to go and to try things out their way. Oh, we were at Dairy Queen the other night, and I noticed on the app that you could get a small blizzard for $1. You want a blizzard? Get the app. It's $1. It's for a small blizzard. It's a good deal. Now, I didn't need a blizzard, diabetes and all. Technically, nobody needs a blizzard, all right? But I like blizzards, all right? Ice cream mixed up thick, some kind of yummy treat inside, like Kit Kat bars or cheesecake. That's a good one. And I thought about it for a bit, and I decided, much to my nurse daughter's objections, Dad, you should not be eating that. I went and I looked at the options on the menu. And they looked so good. The Oreo, fudge brownie, and Smarties. I didn't know what to take, but my eyes landed on something called Snickerdoodle cookie dough. And the corners of my mouth crept into a smile. I'll have that, I said. Sounded good. And I was excited to devour this treat for only $1. You should get the app. Then I sat down and pulled out the spoon, which was loaded with what appeared to be delicious happiness. And I took a giant bite. Oh, the ice cream was good. It was cold. It was creamy. The chunks of cookie dough so tasty. But after a few moments, the taste kind of settled in. And I had a couple of more mouthfuls. And I was kind of like, Because I noticed the taste that was in there. And it kind of made me pause eating. This taste that just didn't seem right. It tasted like cinnamon. Apparently, Snickerdoodles, whatever they are, have cinnamon in them. And apparently some people think this is a good flavor. I don't know, maybe an apple pie, but alas, my treat ended up in the garbage can because it doesn't go with ice cream and cookie dough. I tried a few more bites, but I just chucked it out because even though the sound of it was attractive, the look of it was very enticing. Man, once that taste settled in, my refined palate told me it was time to stop. After years of indulging themselves in the sinful enjoyments of the other nations, worshiping all the false gods of these lands, the Israelites finally had enough. See, there's always consequences with sin, aren't there? Though we have a hard time seeing them, especially in the beginning of these things. We're processing all of that right in the moment. It's with maturity, it's with spiritual growth, where our hearts search after God more so than our own desires, that we finally learn these lessons in life. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. But for the average person, in the heat of the moment, with the lure of friends doing their things, they're drinking, they're seemingly having a great time, with the daily flirtations of the attractive coworker, combined with the constant nagging and fighting at home, getting involved in certain things and falling into certain behaviors. It's easy, isn't it? Because what is directly in front of us in the moment looks good. And so the brain shuts off our logic, the reason. Because our nature, our sinful nature, it kicks in. And even though we know there will be consequences of any actions we take, temporary seems to take precedence, right? And that's the way temptation works, right? The immediate rush of a quick pleasure always wants to win against the long-term results of damaged relationships and broken lives and destroyed families. Man, all these reports on little old PEI going off the charts of police, you've probably seen it in the news, stopping impaired drivers, just astronomically going up. They've had too much to drink, they've been smoking pot, and then they're out driving a car. I don't know about you, I've known so many people who have become alcoholics, and as a result, they have done so much damage to their life, to their health, to their families. They've been hurt, they're broken up entirely. But it's amazing, you watch TV, and all the beer commercials show people having fun, right? They're at parties, and they're smiling, and they're having the time of their lives. And I've never seen one show, a guy 10 years in the future. Now, there's this picture of a man, alone, vomit on his shirt, passed out, no family, no friends, right? None of the commercials ever show a car impaled on a telephone pole, the driver dead at the wheel, brought to you by such and such. Now those are the real life consequences, but those images don't sell beer, do they? The Israelites had been facing the consequences of their choices for years now. And the nation of Midian, they came in and they stole everything from them. They destroyed all of their crops, so they had nothing left to eat. They took their animals that they needed to farm to produce what they needed to survive. Now, the enemy, it describes, would sweep in like a plague and just leave them nothing time and again. And so they were a terrified and starving people, a people lost to the consequences of their own choices. And so finally, at this bottom of the pit that they were in, they looked up out of it and they cried out to God for help, and God heard them. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah. Not Oprah. Ophrah, a different thing, right? Which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Now, allow me to paint a picture for you here of how this angel found Gideon, because it's easy to skip over quickly and miss the irony. Gideon, like the rest of his people, and understandably so, was hiding his grain from the Midianites. He was so scared of his food being stolen from him and his family. It was a terrifying time, very traumatic time for them all. And so he's in this wine press, we're told, threshing his wheat. Let me tell you, that's an odd way to do that. They had no tractors, they had no machinery to do this. It was all done by hand. And to separate wheat from the chaff is that fuzzy, useless stuff you see up on top, right? When it was cut down, a person would go and they would stand in a place where there was some wind, often at the top of a hill where the wind would blow over it. And they would toss it all up. And the wind would grab the lighter chaff and blow it all away, while the heavier wheat, the good stuff, would fall back down to the ground. So to do what he was doing here, in a hole in the ground, at the bottom of a wine press, this was a chore, people. There was no wind to draw away the chaff. But he was in there because it was a good hiding place, all right? It was a good spot to be kept from being seen. Because Gideon was a worried and scared man trying to make some food and to survive. That is the position the angel of the Lord finds him in. And so the greeting given to Gideon here is kind of a surprise. God is with you, mighty hero. Gideon probably hears it and looks over his shoulder like, a mighty hero? Are you talking to me? Yeah, I don't think so, Tim. I'm hiding in a hole in the ground because I'm frightened for my life. And yet, the angel takes out his phone and he looks at the picture and he double checks it and he's like, yeah. And then he does his best monk impersonation. He's the guy, all right? And now here, Gideon asks him a question. It's a really good question, one that has been asked many times over the years in various ways, but usually with the same reasoning. Here's the question he asks. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say, the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. Whew. How many times have you heard questions like this? How many times have you asked questions like this? If there is a God, why is there so much bad stuff in the world? If God cares about people, why does he let evil happen? Why is there so much hurt and pain and suffering? Why do countries fight each other with all these innocent people in the way getting hurt and killed? Why do so many children go to bed every night hungry? Gideon looked around at his current situation. Man, my people are dying. They're starving. They're reduced to a shell of what we once were. Why would God let this happen? Why hasn't he intervened with all this power, all these supposed miracles that they tell us, that these stories of what happened when we came out of Egypt? Seas parting, plagues descending on the enemy. Why would God not help now? All good questions. And I don't want to oversimplify things, but let me say this. I've said it before. Sin has consequences. If you stick your hand in a fire, you're going to get burned. But when somebody does that, nobody asks, why did God allow me to burn my hand? And the problems we face today, the evil that runs loose, the fighting that destroys, and the pain that is inflicted upon so many, it all goes back to Genesis chapter 3 and mankind deciding to do their own thing. We choose to sin. We choose to be selfish, to want what we want, to do what we want to do. War happens because people think about themselves first, instead of choosing to love their neighbor and want what's best for them. People are hungry not because there isn't enough food in the world to eat, supplies in the world. There's an abundance of it all. But the rich, like us, hoard it. We keep the bulk for ourselves. Groceries aren't the crazy prices they are now because these giant companies are hurting for money. It's greed, selfishness. Israel was in the position it was in because they chose it. They abandoned God and they chose their own ways instead of what was good for them. And if our world, and our country, our culture, if we want to get out of the hole we have dug, then we need to repent of our sin and turn back to God. Simple. Gideon decided to do just that. He became a leader to his people, a guide for them. Now, it takes a little bit of convincing. You can read the story for yourself. He asks for some signs from God, that he's still around, and he gets proof of it. And so he goes and he raises up an army of people, 32,000 men, to go and to fight the Midianites, to gain their freedom. But this happens, and God's like, wait a sec, no. See, if you have that many fighters, you might think that you did all of this on your own. And so he whittles the army down. He sends home 22,000 of the timid ones. You guys just scatter on home. And then he does some more things, and he ends up with only 300 men left. Quite an army to fight such a huge battle on the horizon. But they weren't doing this on their own. And if God is for you, who could be against you? If your heart is focused on the Lord, your attention is centered on the right things, then he will be your guide and your strength. As Jesus taught us to pray, he will deliver you from evil. Well, Gideon is instructed to divide up these men into 3 groups of 100 each. And all of them are armed with torches, and ram's horns, and clay jars. They're like, saying, what? No swords, no spears, no shields, just some flashlights and some trumpets and some pots? I mean, David at least had a slingshot and some rocks against his giant. What kind of a plan is this? Don't you see the army down there? They number into the multiples of thousands and thousands. They look like a swarm of locusts down there. Sand pebbles on a beach, too numerous to count. Come on. But that was the plan. And when the signal was given, they shined their lights. They blew their horns and they smashed their pots. And in all the confusion and the noise, the Midianite army believed themselves to be surrounded. And fear seized their hearts. Terror overwhelmed them. And they actually believed their fellow soldiers were attacking them, and so they ended up fighting each other. Gideon and his men, 300, small little army, they simply stood there and watched in amazement while this massive army shouted and screamed and panicked and pretty much took each other out. The conditions they went into battle in were incredible. The odds were against them, and the situation looked grim. But when God is the one doing all the work, you will always come on top. Gideon believed himself to be far from this mighty hero that he was first announced to be. He was not a warrior, just a timid, fearful man, full of doubts, with lots of questions. And yet, because of his willingness to turn his heart over to God, to trust in his words, he was able to be used by him to lead the Israelites back into knowing the Lord and following him as well. Our world today is very much like the one the Israelites lived in. The stories in the book of Judges, they parallel our own stories, our own culture so much. When we fall away from God, when we forget his goodness and his truth, and we walk away from the foundation that he has laid for for us, the foundation that always helps us and guides us and keeps us from harm, we always end up in a bad place. History repeats itself. Now, you may not think of yourself as a mighty hero, but you don't need a cape or a utility belt or a suit of armor with jetpacks and repulsor beams and the fists to be. Because a hero for God is a person willing to follow him. A hero for Jesus is a person willing to trust that his ways are always the best ways. And in order to make a difference in this broken, busted, old world, we do so by stepping in and living for him. We serve others. We care for the hurting. We bring help to the poor, to the hungry. We visit the lonely, and we love even the unlovable. Yeah, power ring would be nice. But the open hand of love in the name of Jesus is what truly makes you a hero. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for this incredible tale. One that goes down in ways that we just don't expect as believers. Miracles happening, a massive army overtaking themselves with only a few lights, broken pots and trumpets blasting around them scared. Because God, through our own power and strength, we can do so little. Often we can do nothing. And yet when we stand on the foundation that you have laid for us in your word, through the teachings of Jesus, through his guidance of what love really is, we can stand on a foundation that can show this world how to get out of the pit that they have dug themselves into. Help us, Father, to be that light, to be that love, to be that example, and to show your truth, to shine your truth every chance we get. In Jesus' name. Let's all stand together again.
These are the days of an
1996. That brings me back to a good time. Thank you for being here today. God bless you all. Hope you have a good week and hope you are filled with lots of opportunities to share your love and the love of Christ with everyone. Hope to see you all next week and happy St. Patrick's Day.